Welcome everyone. I feel honored that you are joining the Dharma festival. Taking part in this is extremely meaningful, and there is room for all kinds of participations in this. And a lot of you have been taking part in the festival in the past few days. And as you have seen and heard, that this festival is to put the Dharma in the landmark of America. Buddha Dharma in America. Celebrating that there is something to be joyful about. Turning point of American karma towards greater and broader, lighter, basic sanity. Celebrating basic sanity is the purpose of this festival. Those of you who took part in the past few days will be able to communicate the energies, disciplines, involvement that we are able to at least say that this is by no means just something easy matter, but in order to celebrate it takes energy, time and effort. Tonight, the last part of the Dharma festival is concerned. I'm afraid there's no music, and no we have film shows or slideshows of anything, and it is a straight talking. Hoping that you won't be bored with it. If you do so, that's part of the festival. On the other hand, as it is advertised or put out that the subject matter that I'm going to speak tonight is American karma, Buddhism and American karma. I feel personally extremely responsible of what is happening in this country, and in relationship to that, I feel extremely responsible that how we could direct our steering wheel to the right path, right approach. And it is extremely heavy burden for me. And it is also extremely a lonely journey for me as well at the same time. Trying to communicate to someone and trying to tell somebody, maybe deaf or dumb or maybe overly extroverted, but on the other hand, extremely over-extroverted. And one tends to get all kinds of extremes, either working with the deaf and dumb or else working with the overly exposed, overly extroverted situations of students trying to put out messages to living reality is an extremely hard thing to do. And to begin with, I would like to express as a first statement is that to me it is a very lonely journey, extremely lonely. And I feel that I'm just a grain of sand in the midst of nowhere. Actually, to be precise, a grain of sand put in a gigantic airfield, but there are no sands to relate with. The only thing that you see is airplanes rushing in and out. All areas to be paved, concretized, grain of sand. And that loneliness is always present. The heavy burden is always real. By no means this is having great fun in terms of entertainment or in terms of having a big deal that one can occupy oneself, cheering up oneself particularly. But this is a very heavy burden. And it is more heavy burden because there's no one to blame to. And one cannot ask one's boss, I would like to quit this job. I would like to have better paid and less pain. And there's no boss. There's no payment involved, no obligations involved. There's no one to complain about what you're doing. The very interesting point about this is that the very idea of aloneness makes you typically strong and energetic. For lack of any further possibilities of chickening out, of course. So I thank for Milarepa, Vajradhara, Telopa, and Naropa, Gampopa, Milarepa, so forth. The lineage has put me in this particular situation and no choice. It was a very clever thing. The dream of Milarepa says that he dreamt before he left Marpa that he was the mother vulture who laid hundreds of eggs. Out of it, hundreds of chickens came out of it, and they flew all over the space, all over the place. And this is the expression of entire space is filled with the practicing lineage, the message of the practicing lineage. It is interesting to look at that from that point of view, that practicing lineage plays an extremely important part in my life. Relating with the students, presenting the Dharma, and all of this are expression of practicing lineage. And students are practicing painfully, appreciatively, boringly, whatever. But still, turning the wheel of the Dharma, which is a cosmic wheel, gigantic, by one earthly man, is extraordinarily a lonesome, very lonely journey. It is more lonesome because no choice involved. And from that point, we could get into the ideas for that American karma is taking part in my karma, or the karma of the lineage as well, which is that in this country, almost at the beginning of the century, the Westerners have been opened to all kinds of Eastern spirituality by means of rethinking in their own traditions, Judaism, Christianity, whatever, mystical experience and so forth. A lot of Europeans were exposed to theosophy, or study of magic in the beginning of the century. And a lot of Westerners, Europeans predominantly at that point, begin to take their journey to the east, India, Burma, Thailand, Ceylon, and so forth. From Buddhist point of view, that they have able to get something out of it. And a lot of people are extremely open to the spiritual movement of Hinduism, of study of yoga. And the real meaning of Eastern approach to life. A lot of scholars as well, who have already studied Sanskrit, Pali, classical Chinese, Japanese, have involved re-examining the area which they didn't cover. In other words, what I mean is that the founding of the new land of America by the Europeans was the first materialistic search for new space, new area. They felt living in Europe is extremely claustrophobic and all kinds of hassles involved. And also they begin to realize that one could be freer if one know how to sail, one know how to relate with another continent, another country. And people begin to sail in the ocean and sail until they found land, of American continent or whatever. And that search of a materialistic statement was ended at some point. And then there was another kind of sailing process in the ocean began to develop, and that was the search of spirituality. It's begun to develop, rediscovering that the areas they conquered, they colonized India, Ceylon, Burma, Thailand, whatever. That area which they conquered have something more to give than purely political having control, economical having control, and having further pleasures involved, other than having Indians to fan themselves or derbies to clean your shirt and pants, or Indian chauffeurs to drive you around, making good cooks to train in the British style, Western style, to cook you a good meal. Those approach to making slaves of those particular natives are, after all, not all that pleasurable, and need some further approaches involved in the early stage of colonial approach, at the early beginning, right at the beginning, before we invented dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, or air conditioning machines, relatively speaking, of course. There's that greater materialistic approach by using human beings as part of a mechanism, part of a machine, which is sort of outdated at this point. And then we came up with the second phase in which that we are fully automatized. We have automatic machines, central heatings, dishwashers. Washing machines, dryers, and all kinds of way that we don't even have to communicate to those slaves anymore. But by pressing a button, the electricity is our slave. Electric dust. Dust means a slave or servant. That is traditionally used as a name of servant, and it has also mystical meaning behind it as well. Like you say you're a servant of a god, you will say you are Goddas, or if you're a servant of Ram, you say Ramdas, or if you're a servant of Krishna, you call yourself Krishna Das, that you are at his service, employed by him, sustained by him, and strengthened by that. So in this case, the metaphor here is a very limited, a very materialistic one, rather than that of the mystical approach particularly. But nevertheless, that there is that problem of we have become somewhat self-sufficient in many ways in our journey to physically being comfortable. And definitely that we have the technological insight or the information to make ourselves highly comfortable and highly efficient as far as our living situation is concerned, that there is no hassles involved, that everything could be handled by automation and electricity, that electricity become our servant, our slave. From that point of view. But somehow that particular approach doesn't last all that long, because we begin to feel that such materialistic approach doesn't give us enough comfort, enough security, satisfaction anymore at all. Something else wrong with us. And then we ask ourselves twice, what other way of getting ourselves basically, fundamentally happier, comfortable? Is of course obvious. Maybe it is possible that you don't go to church often enough. Maybe there's something wrong with that. Maybe God is punishing you. And then the area of that we have explored islands of this earth, we have explored the possibilities of comfortable situations, technological means to provide ourselves comfortable enough. But then the other thing is maybe mystical comfort might be involved. We might try to bring that in. And maybe there's a mystical comfort that we could create. And then we might be comfortable. It is highly possible. How about that? And of course, why didn't I think that before? Let's find out. Let's find a way that, supposing if I expose myself completely to that approach, then what happens, maybe I would get some kind of entertainment at the same time that by being the slave of mystical experience, which I wouldn't have any hesitant to give in to, and let us become highly evolved that realm. So in turn we become mystical thus. Being enslaved by mysticism, philosophy, metaphysics, theology, and even meditation, and so forth. That the idea is that still materialistic approach, because we are still searching for something in which that we could seek pleasure, even by being by slave, whatever it may be, but still that eventually we become the Lord. If you become a good slave, honest slave, genuine slave, then there is a strong possibility that the Master begin to acknowledge us. Having acknowledged, then we begin to be raised at the level of the Master itself. And in turn we become the ruler of the universe. And that seems to be the process of spiritual materialistic approach. And American karma, as far as it goes, is that we have going through generations up to this point of kind of struggle, that America is highly concerned with the God right at the beginning, for the very fact that even the foundations of the nation is based on a concern with the God. And there's tremendous fear about the God. And for the very fact that the message is printed on your currency by saying that we trust God, that this currency is blessed. Our nation is blessed by God, and what we do is blessed, and our exchange, what we go on with our society, is be blessed, and we are on God's side and be blessed. And that notion seems to go on, particularly in this country. There is a fear of not being on the right side is highly prominent, and lots of fears involved from that point of view. We could say that goes on up to the present situation of spiritual materialistic approach that happens right now at this end. Until today, that being paranoid that we might be on the wrong side of something or other, that we could be punishable. According to Buddhist development of America is concerned, that as approach to Buddhist development of America is concerned, rather, is that the first introduction of Buddhism in this country has been Zen approach, Zen Buddhism. And that particular Zen approach has been very self-conscious approach. In some ways, you can say, I suppose, that a self-conscious approach of Zen Buddhism is largely based on discovering such delight, such relief, that after all we don't have to stick towards the right side as it is printed in our dollar bill anymore, as Constitution said so. But we could be no mind. We could be nobody. The Shunyata philosophy permits that it's okay to do anything what you want, be free and so forth, which is, I'm afraid I'm putting very simply, very too much simplified, but nevertheless there is that element of let go. Open. Nothing is worth bothering, and nothing isn't worth bothering. And let ourselves tune into Zen philosophy is slightly exaggerated form of Mahayana, and somehow I feel that Nagarjuna or Bodhidharma for that matter wouldn't quite say it that way if they were in this country at that particular time of the period. But that's not the matter anyway. The freestyle approach without any disciplines involved at all, none whatsoever, has become an interesting approach, basically. And after the Zen flash that has happened, as at the same time that a book called Zen Flash and Zen Bone has existed, which is a very timely book, a Zen Flash of America had happened at that point. And then next processes that America has also gone through without going through any of Hinayana approach, none whatsoever at all, but Mahayana as first flash of everything's okay and there's no body, no ego, no self, and you can do what you like and everything's free. And no God particularly to relate with, and the atheistic approach with that nature has developed. And beyond that, then the hint of Vajrayana, Tantric Buddhism, has begun to also develop in America, later stage, which is the psychedelic age or psychedelic era that developed in this country. That maybe there's non-caring things happening, but at the same time there are possibilities of energies exist, and the possibilities of forms and figures and messages and everything that they feeling the cosmic energy, and there's a sense of strength is involved in what we believe. And not only because what seemed to be careless and okay, but within that level there's a tremendous impetus that began to happen, a sense of insight and a subtle approach to life. And that movement became a very important part of American spiritual development, of American karma, as far as the development of Dharma is concerned. And this case, Dharma is, I'm not referring to particularly Buddhist tradition alone, but a universal Dharma. I'm sure the Jesuits had more to say about acid trips that they have taken themselves, or for that matter, any other traditions. Maybe some hip rabbis have something to say about that as well, if there are. I'm sure there are, if there are possibilities. And all kinds of other spiritual movements that happen in this country, from the Western approach, whereas the Eastern approach to open path has become very powerful at that point. That is not, I wouldn't exactly say that is the tantric vanguard as such, but that is the tantric dawn or shadow of the possibilities in this country, in America, that there is possible exposure to three other principles could involve the Zen philosophy, approaching towards Zen tradition, aesthetics and philosophy, and the idea of the dichotomy in the Zen dialogue which involved, which create further way of, shall we say, blowing one's mind out, exposing one's mind out. And in asset generation is concerned, lots of energy, lots of strength, tremendous strength, and the tremendous possibilities and potentials of that. This approach is workable, and this approach is promising in many ways. If I may view it from a Buddhist point of view at this point, is that as far as American economic development and all that is concerned, it is still underdeveloped situation. Nevertheless, quite possible a lot of people got awakened, become powerful spiritually by the Zen movement, by the asset movement, whatever that happened in this country, and music and everything. But nevertheless, it is still underdeveloped. And materialistic approach become too prominent rather than the spiritual approach. There is no fundamental discipline is involved. That whole thing become typical, absolutely typical American approach. That is to say, instead of driving, instead of walking rather, you drive to a next door neighbor. There is a lack of a Hinayana approach to life, real lack of a Hinayana approach to life, and no discipline, and no approaches towards discipline even, either. And that approach becomes very important in the spiritual development. And one doesn't begin from the glamorous point of view, extraordinary point of view of the path, as far as the Oriental approach is concerned. One begins from the simple and painful point of view, uncertain and confused point of view, that you are confused, you are painful, you find yourself highly neurotic and so forth, which is not particularly excitable, but confused, painful, and one doesn't feel particularly high, but feel extremely low, in fact. That is why I came here. I feel so low, and so confused and so painful, and it's okay, you come and sit with us. And let's work this your low thing. Not that I'll give you antidote, then you could be high, and you could feel great. But okay, let's work with the low. You feel low, okay? That's fine. Let's work that way. You feel small, that's nice. Okay, let's work that way. You feel simpler, confused, and black, and depressed, that's fine. Work that way. And let's not try to do anything with that. And let us bring you in your entire thing that you have with you, let us bring that into a meditation cushion. And don't try to shake anything off. You are very precious now. You feel low and depressed, but let's not shake any dust out of that. And here you sit on the meditation cushion with everything you have, you had. Now sit on the meditation cushion. Now sit on it. Just sit and practice and sit. Don't try to shake off your depressions. Let's keep them intact, and confusion and so forth. It's good. Just let's work that way and keep it on your cushion. Just let's keep it that way. Just don't try to make any funny games out of that. And you are not going to be saved, or you are not going to have a good shower, a good bath out of that. Just sit, dirty as you are, clumsy as you are. That's beautiful. Maybe you would like to stand up and cook in the kitchen with your clumsiness and pour a cup of tea. Just work, and then sit back. Go ahead and sit back. Just sit. The whole approach there seems to be a sense of acceptance and appreciating that our clumsiness, whether it goes on our mind or our being, and accept the whole thing as a workable situation. That in fact your crudeness is also workable in itself. That seems to be the approach, or shall we say, Hinayana approach of Buddhism, of the first stage that we could come across if our journey takes towards Buddhist land, so to speak, is highly unglamorous, absolutely unglamorous, and in fact slightly depressing. And by no means no kicks involved at all. It seems that, as far as I see it, American karma of Buddhism is concerned, that we lack that kind of approach. In this country, that we were presented in a certain promises of sudden enlightenment of Zen tradition and tantric possibilities of LSD approach, and we end up nowhere. That a child is handed with the electric mixer and electric knife to cut your steaks with. And the child is going to press any buttons, either to cut himself or put his finger into the mixer to cut his finger out. And that has been the problem so far as we see it. The mixer is represented in the Zen flashes that happen in America, and the electric carving knife is that of the tantric possibilities, as well as the possibility that happened. Both have very definite symbols involved, those two images that we have discussed. But we don't seem to have enough possibilities of working with our crudeness, our approach in general to spiritual discipline. There's lots of need for discipline. And in fact, that particular idea, what I'll be talking about, the idea for discipline is concerned, it is the anti-spiritual materialism, is the discipline that we are not going to get easy deal or quicker way, sudden enlightenment as such, but we are going to work manually, properly, that we have to surrender something, definitely, generally. That's American karma, is that we have to work our karma as we go along, as we approach ourselves to our involvement properly, thoroughly. That need for tremendous discipline, the discipline which doesn't even require physical ascetic approach or any other approach that might seemingly heroic, but discipline in a very fundamental sense of really giving ground or the carpet under your feet at all, no ground to work on. Whenever there's ground of promise for spirituality, that is, from that point of view, could be said as spiritual materialism. So when there's no ground, nothing to step on, nothing to take care of ourselves as if we had a tremendous security, that the lineage is behind us, the tradition is behind us, therefore we could be freer, happier, and the promised land, so to speak. So the point of a discipline here is concerned, it's a question of no ground, none whatsoever. Absolute no ground. And that is the need for American karma. That if we have slightest ground in the American karmic situation of the Dharma, of the students' consciousness who are studying, becoming students of Dharma is concerned, as soon as we begin to sow a further seed of promises for any kind, that it is not anymore an enlightened approach, that whole thing becomes another expansion of our territory. As if we have managed to buy, instead of apartment, we bought a house. Instead of just being friendly with the neighboring countries, we managed to make friends with the Russians. That it's a way of expanding our territory, a highly materialistic approach. It is very subtle from that point of view. That spiritual materialism is fundamentally . reduced ourselves into infant. Infant in the sense that we have pushed enough of our parents that they should give us candy. And we made a lot of research work how we could get the candy instead of eating solid food, real good food. And the kind of spirituality that we got is because we screamed too much for that, and we got what we want. And we have a problem of diabetes from that point of view. Which is disease of spiritual materialism. And no medicine can cure except stop taking sugar of spiritual materialistic sweetness, honey, maple syrup, whatever. We could have probably caution period, rather short period. Quite possible, if anybody would like to ask questions, have to raise their voice because the rest of the people would like to hear them.
You talked about stop taking sugar. Last night, it seemed that there was a lot of sugar going on in terms of spiritual materialism. I don't know, I can't put together this whole thing of on one hand light and love, and on the other hand chaos and confusion. It seems to me that your approach is more chaos and confusion, a fact and figure. And this whole Dharma festival that I came up from New York to see has been like really sweet with light and love. You know, are you ripping off the Hindus money, or I mean, what is going on? Of course, you know, otherwise it's not worth anything. And I don't know what to say, but that's the. You know, I'm going to say what I think. Of course.
Thank you. That's very fitting. In fact, your approach was very apt. As you ask question, the point here we feel is that as we talk about Dharma festival, it is to put the whole approach into the geography that there is such a possible approach that celebrating the existence of Dharma in this country. And that is like having a celebration, big party, with lots of wine and good food and dance around. Good party. That's what we have. We have an extraordinary, beautiful party. Everybody's enjoyed it thoroughly, and some people got drunk out of it, but nevertheless, and it is being respected, and since it is being drunk at the festival, so it's a proper thing to do, expression of joy, whatever. Metaphorically speaking. Now that you attend the Dharma festival, a tremendous feast of that food and wine and entertainment, come back to home and feels that depressed tomorrow, whatever. I wish that I could be at the Dharma festival again and having a good time, because coming back home is no fun. It's very depressing. I have to meet our obligations and so forth. That if you try to create another Dharma festival at your home, invite lots of friends and have lots of parties and drink wine and so forth. And that goes on second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day and so forth. Try to extend it for the rest of your life. Then you do get diabetes. And one shot is enough to celebrate possible party, but not as constant happening. Thank you.
Became interested in possibility of spiritual reality. I found it would help me transcend the limiting life framework, perhaps a conceptual framework, which related to our world, to ourselves.
What is the question?
What do you think, do you see this happening? What do you think of it, and how do you think you can avoid it?
Well, it is happening obviously, but I think there's no question of trying to avoid it, but trying to see the situation is there already, and then one has to provide oneself improvising what is a sane approach, what is an insane approach. And it takes a lot of personal initiative from that point of view. It could, certainly. In fact, it has been, as we know. Depends on meditation is approached as a way of stripping out one's own mask, or whether meditation is regarded as a way of becoming oneself as Superman. That's highly individual, and it is possible, definitely. Yeah. Dharma is truth, or it is, has been said, is that which is knowable, is Dharma, and that which provides a path for you to walk with. And also, Dharma is that which also studies the unnecessary things, that how many teeth the claw has, or how many wrinkles does the worm has. Those are dharmas, opposed to dharma. In other words, that if there's any studies involved with entertainment, that could be said as a cheap dharma or adharma. And any studies which relates with this pattern, path, discipline, confident truth is dharma. Between the Zen approach and Tantric approach, that is, Zen approach is work of art, predominantly. philosophically Zen tradition is belonging to that of the Yogacaran tradition, which is the art makers of Buddhism. That is the Zen approach, is art makers of Buddhism. And tantric approaches being work of art is not a particularly big deal. And in order to express work of art, you have to also an artistic aspect to express as well at the same time. So consequently, in terms of actual practices concerned, the Zen tradition talks about the precision and the subtleties and the sense of being on the spot. In the almost Hinayana version of Buddhism. And Tantric tradition talks about that within that ground that one can work and relate with colors and sight and sense perception, sense consciousness, as any sense pleasures involved are workable situation. The contrast like Tantric Vidyadharas they wear all kinds of colorful robes. And the Zen monastic system, that anything they wear is black, is solid and definite. So two ways of thinking is the artistic and precision or playful and colorful. Very rough approach.
How must there be so many approaches? It seems so earthbound to have many approaches to the same thing, which is universalist.
Because of it. How many approaches were there?
Why must there be so many approaches to the same awareness?
How many approaches were there in the same awareness?
Miraji and Ariga and everything, Christianity. There should be so many approaches.
How should be there so many approaches?
It should be a simple, it should be one thing.
There should be one thing. True. We could say quite simply all these approaches are materialistic one, and therefore there should be one approach. But in order to have one approach, that one need to be validated by many. You have a zero, in order to have zero is, why zero is zero? Because zero is not a one, because the zeros are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 9. So the more you try to simplify, but more there's the alternatives involved at the same time. So it's not as simple as that, but nevertheless, the one approach in terms of one's own development is concerned, it is as objective view is concerned, and it's up to you to jump into the boat or the cliff. That will be your path. Doesn't matter about the other approach.
I get put off by all of them.
Well, choose one. Choose one. Choose one. You don't have to try to make sure that you got the best of it, but try to choose one which you think workable. It's up to you.
We're all workable in one way or another. One is workable in a way that another one isn't.
Well, try one.
I have.
Have you got into it?
I'm in a state of confusion right now. I've received the knowledge of Miraji. I went to the unification church for a while. My grandmother taught me Christianity for 4 or 5 years, and it's getting me to a state where
take one discipline for 3 years, jump into it, see what happens. You have to stay as much as that. It's necessary. Good luck. Excuse me?
Why do you feel lonely when you have so many friends willing to work with you?
Why what?
Why do you feel lonely when you have so many friends willing to work with you?
Because of it. But there's no pain.
Loneliness is not pain.
No, it's alone rather than lonely. Thank you. I'm glad you're concerned about that.
Here I can be seen. I was just interested in whether you had an opinion, because you spoke about American spiritual materialism, whether the American interest in Eastern approaches is older in the sense that, as they pointed different ways, because my question is sort of follow what the other fellow was saying, is that Americans have tended to ignore the spiritual disciplines that have grown up in the West and have like sort of jumped into the East. And there are like monastic Christian communities which have not really, there hasn't been any particular flash of interest in them. I just wondered if you had any
Opinion on what?
on the going to the East, well, ignoring spiritual disciplines
that exist in the West. You mean that exists in the West? Yeah, that's a very good question actually. No opinions as far as I'm concerned. And in fact what I find is actually that a lot of my students go back to their origin. They become good Jews. They become good Catholics. True. The Buddhism is non-dogmatic because for the very fact that Buddhism doesn't believe in God and the atheistic religion. That's why a lot of people question whether Buddhism should be regarded as a religion at all or should be excommunicated by that circle. But somehow or other that Buddhism managed to get into being a discipline of religion as such. And now what's happening is that Buddhism is providing atheistic spacious ground in which any theistic people could get back to their theistic work. So that's how close.
more of a technique than a religion?
Well, it is a religion. It has discipline and it has pressures. But on the other hand, if you define religion as believing in God, Buddhism is no religion. So let's leave it to the professors or the linguist, whatever. But Buddhism does provide a lot of space and room. It makes good Jews.
Who was Jesus' teacher? Who was Jesus' teacher?
Me. sorry, I didn't meant it. Too bad.
Could you speak a little bit more about what you mean by discipline? Can you talk about it?
Can you say again?
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about discipline?
I could talk about discipline again and again and again. Sure. But it seems to be necessary in this country, this particular set of individuals we have in America, concerned that discipline is one of the most lack. And people discipline themselves because there's some kicks involved. That's why they involve themselves in discipline. It's like a donkey and a carrot tradition. The donkey will be persistent if there's a carrot in front of its nose. And if there's no promise, there's no discipline involved. That seems to be the common flu, sickness, plague that involve the spiritual searchers in this country. That discipline should be non-striving. That the reason for discipline is because they're not going to get anything out of discipline either, but simply just to be disciplined. And that is particularly a Buddhist way of viewing discipline. And I think a lot of people have difficulties in approaching that, understanding that, but simply it's necessary. Definitely it's necessary, simply necessary. And discipline does play an extremely important part to realize there's nothing to gain. Therefore one should be disciplined. And I'm sure the insurance policy wouldn't agree with that. If you have an insurance policy towards enlightenment, and so far as we're concerned, I don't think anybody had to form such a corporation yet.
I had almost an inversion on that experience. But this one is, I felt that this one was helping me. And there have been some kinds of results and also more pain. I haven't been able to then continue with it. Nothing happened, it was all right. I felt like I was getting help from being disciplined. I could sustain it. You say something about, it seems, I guess the point is it's easy to start a discipline, it's not easy to carry along. Are you going to handle that, or is that what discipline's about?
I'm sorry you have to fast forward.
When discipline helped, I found it helpful. I wasn't able to keep it up. If it didn't help, it was all right. If it did help, it stopped. The question is, how does one stay with it when the pain and the confusion and the help start really happening? Or is that...
Well, that is the discipline is like an ocean, like a sea, a lake, water. And the challenges that comes along with discipline is like ore. You stay around, which accentuate the existence of the water. So one has to stay in the ocean or the water. You have no choice, otherwise you could be drowned. In other words, that once you're on the spiritual path already, you have no choice. And you don't have even choice to extinguish yourself. It's you are with you, and you have your boat, you have your oar, and it's a self-existing thing. What? What do you think about?
What is the question? Do you believe in reincarnation?
The question of believing is another matter, but I think reincarnation is there. How come you're here? Right there. you walk out of the gate? That's the reincarnation. We have a new sense of mind until we get here. That's continuity. Although physically you were there, you were here, but it doesn't make any differences. It's a question of discontinuity which allows to have continuity. That your state of mind is tuned in a certain situation at some point. Then you come to this point. And there is a sense of change which allows to, I would rather prefer to relate to rather than rebirth than reincarnation. There's no continuity because the discontinuity makes reincarnation or rebirth approach appropriate. It's like a cinema film, that each frame is separate from one to another, but there is some continuity because of its separateness that happens constantly. And the physical birth and death is a very crude example of that. I beg your pardon?
Erotic patterns start to disappear, you start to relate to situations non-materialistically, or is the notion of disappearance a materialistic attitude?
I think it displays a materialistic attitude. Yeah. Well said.
I'd like to ask you, reviewing this winter seminar, I see that you're sort of appealing to a certain economic class. And I was wondering whether you have any seminars for the poor people.
I'm sorry I didn't follow exactly what you said.
I'm saying that you have a class here.
We have what?
I'm saying that the seminars cost a lot of money, and it seems that your organization is appealing to a middle class. And I'd like to know if you have seminars for poor people. People who can't afford these seminars.
People didn't come to the seminar? Can't afford the seminars, yeah. Well, thank you. So yeah. People who can afford the seminars, I think they could if they are conscious of that possibilities of getting into that discipline. And middle class meaning what? That somebody has 9 to 5 jobs. Obviously can't come to seminars because they have their jobs. If they are obliged to have jobs, and particularly have to stick to their obligations. And I think the question is that people can make possible push if people would like to get into it, and if they would like to prepare the ground to get into such seminar. Not that middle class people who has money and just they could come poof into it. And this is a very traditional manner actually. And it is nothing to an American, but it is the instruction that we received from Mahatma, which told America that I can't support you physically, and if you're going to receive teaching from somebody else, you can pay me for the board and what you call board and loan, sorry. Yeah. And if you're going to receive teaching from me, you have to pay me for the teaching's fee, which is this one, nothing to do with making money out of anything, but it is making what you are getting into is a workable situation that you have to sacrifice something, that the generosity of Dharma is very generous, unless there is a ground to be generous at the same time. So it is a reciprocal situation that people fight very hard for money. when they come to seminars, we have experienced that lots of times that they fight tooth and nail. And I don't have money, I don't have so on, so on, so on, so on. And they rent a car and they come out there and still fighting for it, I don't have money. Or whatever situation is involved, those cases is it's very uncomfortable that possibilities of sowing further seed of making this also into a business deal. And I think people can sacrifice if a seminar happens, say, 3 weeks' time, or even 4 months ahead. Take a job, earn your money, relate with the people as you work your living, earn money, come to the seminar, and the seminar becomes worthwhile because you put your energy into as if you're prostrating yourself towards the seminar discipline, sacrifice enough, and pay your money, and you feel you have some relations happening, and that's fine, and then go back to job or whatever. And the whole approach is some kind of non-aggression approach to receiving teaching is one of the most important point of view. If people are approaching the seminar, whatever, it's a very aggressive point of view, then it seems to be that particular frame of mind is not particularly workable at all. And we have in this country extremely convenient karmically that it happens to be money is the only speedometer of that particular approach. When we talk about money, people get very touchy and very powerful, aggressive. And that is the very interesting point in which that capabilities of receiving teaching is based on that aggression of society and money and the obligations involved, which is extremely interesting. And I personally follow that particular approach, personally, that their attitude towards society, money, parents, their emotions. And the money, the dollar is the least of all. But the connotations that people make a big deal out of that is becoming extremely interesting approach. I think there's a lot of things to say about that.
You said a few moments ago something that seemed very right on about discipline, namely that the only discipline worth getting into is that discipline that is free of lust.
Discipline what?
The only discipline that is real is that discipline that is free of lust of purpose, of result. And just a few moments ago, you used that term discipline with connected with the idea of a goal. One might discipline oneself in a job for a few months and accumulate capital with the goal of attending one of your seminars. I find some contradiction between those two.
I don't see any particular contradictions. And if you have a goal, and that goal becomes confused, if you don't have a goal, then the goal becomes clear. I don't see it. Can you repeat? Maybe you could be more accentuated, please. Can you shout more as well?
Here. I speak loud. One more time. It may not be much. What you said just a few moments ago in answering the Southern man's question that one might discipline, you use that word, discipline, oneself for several months with the purpose of attending one of your seminars. And that seems very much to put discipline in the same context as some purposeful end towards it. And previous to that, we've spoken about discipline in a way that freed it from a lust for purpose. And that's the only contradiction I see. It may
What do you mean by lust for purpose?
Well, using the word spiritual materialism.
Materialistic? Well, okay, whatever.
One does not enter the discipline, as you pointed out before, with the fixed notion of arriving somewhere. You know,
Well, yeah, sure.
That place of arrival before mark.
But you're going to arrive at some point, sure. I don't see any contradictions in that you think you're going to arrive at some point, but at the same time you realize you are not, but you think you are. And the whole thing is covered. Gesundheit. Okay, let this gentleman speak first.
You said that Buddhism... You said that Buddhism is an atheistic religion. And I also said that you taught Jesus, that he was a theist. I wish you could explain that.
When I said I taught Jesus, when Buddhism is atheistic, because Jesus has no teachers. Jesus had no teachers. No.
Notion of disappearance was completely materialistic, and then he said something about speed.
Speed? Did you say? I'm sorry, what is the question?
The issue of materialism seems to get very subtle. For me, any action that I initiate, or any action that I continue, like even the action of coming here to listen to you, to ask a question to you, seems some motivation of that action.
I know. Yeah. Well, you see, the point is that if you come here to listen, to hear about the possibilities that you might be in a spiritual materialistic trip is concerned, that is getting first a hint out of that whole thing. But then beyond that is up to you. Or if you go and seek some other teacher, ask them a question and expose yourself to that person. And still it's up to you that whether your approach to the particular dharma is to glorify your ego, or you want to surrender your security of ego. It has nothing to do with the particular gestures you make, but what's happening in your state of mind at that point.
Yeah, this is where it gets subtle for me, because it seems to be some like hope involved. So that at some point, I hope things might different happen. Different quality.
possibility of non-materialistic.
I don't think there's any insurance at all. It had to be your own approach. And you have to catch yourself is much better than following the particular directions that you be recommended how to look like a non-spiritual materialist, and then you'll be safe. There's no approach of that kind involved. It's a question of then how you approach to the whole thing. If you have any sense of basic desire to become somebody, that is spiritual materialism. Or even approaching very subtly, if you have a desire to become a nobody, for that matter, then it's very tricky. Yes, please. There's no differences at all. Your question is very apt. I'm glad you asked that question. It's a question of that the Tibetan way of approaching their spirituality is also very materialistic, equally, extremely, which is similar to what's happened in this country. But the only thing is the Tibetans' approach to spiritual materialism is they didn't have that much choices of the Buddhists and Hindus and Sufis and Christians and so forth. They have only Buddhists of different kind of superstars within the Buddhism. So in this case, we have in America all kinds of things of all kinds of promises of divine light, of the enlightenment people, or that of the healing potential people, or that of all kinds of this and that, up to the level of heart enlightenment. Nobody, which is very tricky.
Many of us have readings that the American faith, the implicit message that Tibetan Buddhism is a dying religion, and it's a celebration of its funeral celebration. I wonder how you feel about that, and whether there's a possibility of those forms remaining alive in some way.
Well, I don't regard this as a particular funeral of Tibetan Buddhism at all. In fact, the opposite. It's a celebration of the birth of Tibetan Buddhism. And more than that, it's christening young child of Tibetan Buddhism of this country. And maybe it could be seen by certain scholars and sociologists that this is a dying culture. Quite possibly, and also hopefully, nobody's going to dress as Tibetans or speak Tibetan language, try to become Tibetans. And that seems to be rather funny at this point. And in fact, nobody can actually do it properly, since there is no particular school environment to do so. But generally, as Tibetan Buddhism is concerned, that we are reproducing or rejuvenating of the Buddhist spirit, which is inspired by Tibetan Buddhism particularly, but basically it is the Buddhist spirit inspiration that's happening. That's why we call it Dharma Festival. And in the subtitle, Celebrating Tibetan Buddhism in America, there's a subtitle that it is particularly stated that sort of festivity of Dharma and Tibetan Buddhism is further reinforcement. Not that people should dress like Tibetans or behave like Tibetans or they should speak their language. But Dharma expands much further than that. It is a lot of openness and a lot of inspirations is involved. Maybe we should stop at this point. Thank you. I would like to thank everybody taking part in this festival. And also, I would like to take this public opportunity in this case, since I believe earlier tomorrow I will have no chance to say thank you to people who take part in this festival yet. And members of Dhammadhatu, who's been magnificently brave and kind. In spite of all the little irritations involved, they work extremely good. And we're from Tail the Tiger. And also I would like to thank thrice the stars of this particular festival, Ramdas, Karan, Bhagwan Das, and all the people involved with that. It has been absolutely wonderful landmark, and actually literally a landmark, because we're here. And also I would like to thank for the public, so to speak. Everybody's taking part beautifully and being extraordinarily receptive of this particular event that we're trying to put together. And it has been magnificently inspiring. Not that I feel that I have a further chance to convert people into my trip. That you care about American karma generally, that is a wonderful thing about the whole thing. And it is your responsibility, and you have created a festival. And if you didn't take care of it, it wouldn't happen at all. And since everybody took part in it, and you create the festival, so it is your burden, if I may say so, and you're doing, and once again, American karma, all over again. And I hope this case it is enlightened karma that Americans should inherit it, that I'm dying to sow a seed of Buddhism and American karma. So American karma could inherit a Buddhist karma at the same time, which we're doing right now. Every penny you spend on a ticket is you're sowing seed in American karma with the Buddhist karma at the same time. So finally, this festival marks that American and the Buddhist karma are united, and finally Buddhism and America got married, and celebrating is a wedding. And you can't say which part of the child belongs to me or him. And you can't separate that this arm is mine, this arm is hers. You can't slaughter your child on the spot. So here we go, and thank you very much. Join it together.